Hello, and welcome to Work From Anywhere. I'm Dan Jackson, the Senior Director of Digital Workplace Product at Crestron Electronics. And what I want to talk to you about today is how we're using technology to address this post-COVID workplace, this new workplace that we're moving to at home, at work, and at school, if you're a university. And so what I wanted to do was go through the agenda really quickly. So I want to start by talking about where the workplace has come from, what the workplace looked like 10, 20 years ago, how it's changed over that time, and then how it's really radically changed over the last 6 months. There's some good information about what employees and executives actually want for the future, right? It's not just about what we want, it's about what the employees want and what the business owners want, how we get there, and then some of the technology highlights that are going to enable you to get there today. So if you look at your workspace or your desk over time, a long time ago, 1997 was certainly a good amount of time ago, you had a lot of stuff in your desk. The idea of working remotely or working from anywhere really wasn't a thing. And the big part of the reason for that was you had a lot of stuff around you. You didn't just have your computer, though your computer was still the primary way of working. You had fax machines, encyclopedias, you had your notepads, you had your Rolodex, which was probably still a paper Rolodex at that time. Certainly you had your separate phone. There was a lot of stuff that you had to carry with you. Nothing was really unified yet. Now, if you fast forward 10 years, a lot of things have changed, right? You no longer need the fax machine. You can get things done with PDFs and emails. Your alarm clock goes away. A lot of your calendaring is really integrated into Outlook and with your email system. So a lot of that stuff is consolidated, but there's still, some other things you tend to need around your desk, even in 2007. And then if you look at where we've come through today, really all of these different devices and all of these different functions have all of a sudden come together, and these are all just apps, whether they're desktop apps or they're apps on your mobile phone. These are software functions within your devices, and you can really and truly become a digital nomad. In fact, you have that whole culture of digital nomads, people who produce work from anywhere and live anywhere, and this is certainly possible today. Well, the interesting part is this technology is actually not radically new. If you look back to 2012, there were some key developments that happened over a few years leading up to that. And all of this, in terms of remote work, was certainly possible even 8 years ago. Mobile apps, while they existed with things like Blackberries, they didn't really come into their own until the iPhone came out and introduced third-party app support, which created first-class experiences on mobile devices to truly exist from anywhere. In 2011, there were a number of big improvements. Cloud video service with BlueJeans launched, which enabled people to take their video conferencing infrastructure, which was 100% on-premise and really restricted to high-end $100,000 meeting rooms, things like telepresence rooms, and start to make that more ubiquitous. At the same time, Office 365 launched with collaborative documents. At the same time, you had Lync launch. So now people had real-time messaging, the ability to do audio and video calls through software in a much better way. So all of these pieces of software really existed in 2012, but if you look at it, people were not using these to their fullest extent. The technology was there, but people had not updated the way that they work to actually really and truly take advantages of all the technologies they had at their disposal. Well, of course, we've come a long way. And so when you look at the state of technology leading up to 2019, a lot of people have really tried to take over email and make it something better. In fact, probably since email has been invented, people have been trying to make email better. And between the growth in Microsoft Teams and Slack, a lot of the email volume is finally shifting over to these new messaging services. These messaging services really have huge daily active user counts in 2019. It certainly has grown a lot since then, but even in 2019, these messaging services were really in a much better place to be able to shift that huge volume of email over to a more efficient means of communication and a more efficient means of collaboration. And so that was finally in place in 2019. And so between all of the other technology advances between 2012 and 2019, there were a lot of changes in terms of what was available. So as I mentioned, messaging services are widely available, widely used. Video meeting services are common, and you could almost say pervasive between the growth in Teams and the growth of the other services, Zoom and WebEx. Really everyone who had worked had access to video meeting services. And everyone also had access to web-based collaboration tools. And that's not just things like Office 365. If you're a developer, you had access to things like Figma and Miro that are really these collaboration tools that go beyond just your standard document types and go deeper into the ways that you work. Things like Asana, things like Trello. All of these different collaboration tools now exist in the web and now exist and can be accessed from almost anywhere. So within 2019, the technology was really in place to fully embrace remote work. But if you look at the reality, remote work was possible. Not many companies had actually changed their minds and really started to adopt remote work. And this is borne out. This is actually a great survey done by PricewaterhouseCoopers, where they surveyed executives to see how many of their employees work remotely at least one day a week. And pre-COVID-19, so looking back into 2019, there's still a lot of companies who had a relatively few workers working remotely, and that's even just working remotely one day a week. So remote work was possible, but the reality was the business had not changed to really take advantage of it. And even if the business had, that a lot of times was used as an excuse. Oh, we can't make remote work possible, so it's not something, well, we can enable for you. Well, along came COVID-19, and with all of the disruption and the badness that got brought along with it, there was a lot of innovation and a lot of adaptation, particularly in the technology space for companies that had to radically redefine how they collaborated, how they used their tools, sometimes in time spans as short as a few days. There was a huge amount of growth in online communication. In just that several month time frame, both Teams and Zoom's usage grew over 500% in each of them. It's a massive growth in the way people use online meeting services. More video is being used. So in March, the proportion of Teams calls with video grew from about 20% to about 40%. And that's a huge amount of growth. That's doubling the amount of video as a percentage, right? Keep in mind the usage is growing massively simultaneously. That's a huge advantage because there's so much nonverbal communication that's used, especially in large group meetings, that it really makes communication and collaboration more efficient and more effective when people are actually willing to turn on video. And so this culture shift and this mindset shift to utilize more video really makes collaboration tools more effective. The technology can only go so far, and the workplace culture and the way you use the tools has to really carry through. And we really saw that happen in a big way, even during what was going on with the pandemic. Now, at the same time, people are starting to become more flexible with their work schedules. Now, there's good and bad to this, right? And Microsoft actually measured this with when people were actually logging onto Teams and when they were logging off of Teams, where they were spending more time within Teams each day. Now, the way they use Teams was different because, of course, you take breaks in the middle to deal with your kids and other things. But you're starting to see this flexibility grow. And this is even just in the first months of the pandemic during March. So now people are starting to become more flexible because the tools are available to them. They can be available for longer, but then they can pick and choose times during the day when they don't necessarily have to be available for working. Your 9 to 5 has all of a sudden become an 8 to 6, but you're not available 100% of that time in the middle. We could all debate whether this is a good thing or a bad thing, but this is the reality that's happening is work is shifting to become more flexible like this. Now, all of this disruption accounted for a huge impact on IT teams that had to stand up these new services and make sure that they were working well. And I'm actually reminded of some of our customers. There's one customer of ours that onboarded 100,000 users into a video communication service in a week. There was another user that turned on video collaboration in 400 classrooms in a month to prepare for hybrid learning environments in the fall. This is a huge impact on IT teams, and they really stepped up to enable the growth and the use of these services. So what happens between shifting to the pandemic and then the life after the pandemic? Well, if you look at that statistic from before COVID-19, very few people were really enabling remote work. Of course, during the pandemic, most people had to shift to full remote work. So there's this massive shift into people working remotely. Well, and again, this is projected after COVID-19. It doesn't return back to the way things were before the pandemic. All of a sudden, everybody had to figure out how to enable remote work. So the idea that our company can't support remote work is really no longer useful as an excuse. Everybody really had to figure out how to use these collaboration tools to enable remote working. And so what you see is this mentality shift to a bit more of the work from anywhere shift. All of a sudden, people are working remotely more, which has a huge impact on the way the rest of us work, even those of us that are in the office. So if you look at where the problems came in with the pandemic, probably the biggest challenge during COVID-19, beyond the personal challenges that this caused for all of us, the biggest workplace challenge is collaboration. And in fact, when people have a choice when they're working from home or they're working in the office, the number one reason they say that they go to the office is to collaborate with other team members. As great as these video services are to be able to communicate, That kind of spontaneous collaboration, the informal communication that happens between people is still not as easy remotely as it is in person. And so that becomes the reason people come to the office. If you think about it, if you can get your solo work done at home, your teamwork and your collaborative work is the reason that you come to the office, which really shifts, what the office means to people. And the reality is people realize that collaboration is difficult, right? They realize that that's a challenge from working from home. So when people have a choice whether they come to the office or don't come to the office, collaboration is going to be a big part of the reason that people choose to come to the office. Well, it's not all easy going when we get back to the office. As I said, work from anywhere will really start to become the new norm, which has some downstream effects to it. First of all, most meeting rooms are not enabled for video meetings. Sometimes you have a very basic telephone in the room. Sometimes you have nothing more than a display. So when we go back and have these collaborative sessions, the reality is most of the people we're collaborating with may be in the office and the rest won't be. So almost all of your meetings that include collaboration in the office are still going to have a remote component, which means your meeting rooms really need to be enabled for video. Even a lot of the rooms that have video in them don't provide what we call a first-class experience for remote participants, which effectively means that the people in the room become the real people in the meeting, and the people who are outside the room sort of become watchers to the meeting. They don't become core participants to this meeting. And if you're looking to really collaborate, you can't have the people that are outside the meeting room become second-class people. They really have to be peers to people within the meeting room. And you've got to have the right technology in those spaces to enable that. The other problem is that most corporations still have a bunch of different communication systems and a lot of legacy systems that are out there. I don't know that anybody still has an old school telephone like that. But the reality is corporations are working hard to bring everything up to the new communication systems. But a lot of them are still stuck there with legacy, plain old telephone system lines, older video conferencing systems. They're going to have to work through this backlog to update their systems to really work the new way that we're working. Well, one of the great ways to do this is with Teams meeting rooms. A Teams meeting room is a really great solution for bringing a first-class video experience for remote participants. One of the great things about a team meeting room is it's a consistent experience from mobile to the desktop to the room. So when somebody, is working on Teams from their mobile device, they can transition the call to the desktop. They can also transition their calls to the room. And it gives them that same experience across all these different types of interfaces. And it's continuously updated. So as you're going along and your mobile device gets updates and gets new features, your desktop device gets updates and gets features, your room device is also getting updates and getting new features. So as the Teams experience evolves, your meeting rooms will continuously evolve with it rather than get stale over time as the system itself changes. So Teams also provides really great audio and video experiences to make sure that everybody who's within the meeting room can see the remote participants well and they can participate. And again, the remote participants can see and feel like they're part of the meeting too. So a Teams meeting room really becomes a key way to bridge that work from anywhere, where you've got remote workers and people in the office having to work together very closely. One of the really interesting ways that Crestron has helped corporations and universities enable video is by using our Flex rolling cart systems, which enable people to drop a video system into a room really simply and easily. When you're looking to install video in a room, Microsoft Teams Rooms has really made it very easy to drop it in, but you still do have to put some stuff in the room. With Flex R Series on a rolling cart, it becomes as simple as literally just rolling a cart into the meeting room, plugging in network and plugging in power, and away you go. It becomes a very simple and easy way to add video to a room without a lot of installation complexity. Now, one of the other things that Microsoft has introduced just during Ignite right now is something called Microsoft Teams panels. And this is a room booking panel that exists outside the meeting room. And I like to think of this as an admin for the room. This not only provides a view into the calendar and who's using the room and what's going on in the room, it can solve all sorts of other headaches around getting to the room, finding spaces, booking spaces, verifying that you're there, even going so far as using plugins to identify where the concierge is, request things like catering, request room cleaning. Again, this has really grown from a basic calendar view to become a full-on admin for the room. And so we view this Teams panel as really becoming an effective way to add a level of admin to your rooms. So it helps craft that experience from when you walk in the door to you get to your meeting room. It makes that a whole lot more seamless. And then once you're inside the meeting room, of course, Microsoft Teams Rooms provides a really great experience within that space. Of course, one of the other shifts that has happened is that now that we're doing online meetings everywhere, we're using our personal communication devices to join meetings all the time. Whether it's your mobile device or your laptop, your meeting is now taking place on your device rather than in person, which means you're taking over that device to have that meeting in a lot of cases. And if you're in a very short meeting, that's great. Using your personal device means people can find you anywhere, you can access your tools from anywhere, you can collaborate with people anywhere. But when you're on extended meetings, you tend to get fatigued with these sorts of things. You've heard the Zoom fatigue, of course, is one of the buzzwords of 2020. Part of the way to alleviate this is by offloading your meeting from your own personal devices onto other devices around you that can actually effectively act like portals. And they give you that ability to have your presence, have your meeting experience next to you, and it's still your meeting experience, but your laptop and your mobile device are available to you to use however you want and aren't taken over by that meeting experience. It really provides a higher level of experience for people who are very invested in teams and doing a huge amount of collaboration. So in summary, collaboration is a key reason that people actually want to return to the office. It's something that has really fallen off with everyone being completely remote, and people realize it, and they're really looking to get better collaboration when they get back to the office. Work from anywhere becomes the way that we work from now on, which means now if we have work from anywhere, you can't make the assumption that everybody who's in this meeting or everybody who you're collaborating with is actually in the office at that time. And that means you're adding an online component to every meeting, which really changes the technology requirements in your spaces at work, because now you can't have a space that is only good for in-person. Every space that you have really has to enable a good online experience so you can bridge in remote participants from everywhere to every single meeting. And the reality is most organizations are not prepared for this. The current state of meeting rooms is lacking, is probably a good way to say it. There's good solutions today with Microsoft Teams rooms. There's ways that you can enable it, but the current state of meeting rooms is not great. If you look at the meeting room experience across all the rooms in an organization, you have some rooms with great experiences, and you have a lot of rooms that really don't have a good experience, whether they don't have video at all, or they have video, but it's on an older platform, or they have video, but it's really not set up right. There are good solutions available today to enable remote work, to enable work from anywhere, including Microsoft Teams Room and some other solutions. But the current state is not great. It's going to be something that organizations really have to work towards improving to enable the new workplace. You've got to think beyond the in-meeting experience. If you look at the day in the life of an office worker, there's a lot of work that gets done with meetings that don't happen during the meeting. There's the pre-meeting, how employees get into the office, that entry experience, how they navigate the office, all the post-meeting work that happens. It's a more holistic experience that is not just what happens in the meeting. Room booking panels, personal communication devices, these are all things that can help you provide a more continuous experience and a better experience as the employee navigates their day. So using your personal device for meetings is great. It's really enabled us to collaborate better and work a lot better during this pandemic. But the reality is, if you're in meetings continuously, you don't want to have to take over your devices with your collaboration tools. When you have continuous presence, you don't want to have to take over your laptop to have a call. You don't want to have to take over your phone to have a call. There's really a great concept of having this sidecar next to you so that you can have your presence on that device. It represents you. You can have your video calls on this sidecar device, but you don't have to take over your own devices to have that meeting. And for those of us that are really living and believing in the remote work and living in these collaboration tools, these devices have a really great purpose. It has really taken the desk phone concept away from being a desk phone, which frankly, is kind of a device that was going away, and it's morphed it into a much better communications experience that augments your other devices and makes it a lot better experience to use these collaboration tools. So I hope you found this informative. I hope you found this valuable. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me, and I'll drop my email address in the presentation. Thanks a lot.